everybody. We are inviting you into the sermon sessions today. The conversation continues. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
We got amen. So we're going to be talking today about our first response series. We are 3 weeks in, and we're going to be talking about what our first response is when we're totally exhausted. Do you guys like that I really wanted to emphasize exhaustion?
Totally.
Am I throwing the totally?
Yes.
Because it wasn't enough just to say exhausted.
No, because that's never enough.
No one says I'm exhausted. I'm totally exhausted.
Who isn't? I'm totally exhausted.
Emphasis.
Wrecked, burnt,
Yeah.
fried, cooked.
Spent. Yeah. On it, running on empty.
Over it.
I want to collapse. Yeah.
Dunzo.
Yeah. So how did the sermon resonate for you guys? What stirred in you?
Ooh.
Throw that out there.
That's a big question. Well,
I mean, the idea was to look at, I love the Matthew 11 text. I'm going to answer the question for you.
Oh, thank you.
The Matthew 11 text, just as a springboard, Jesus' invitation to a weary crowd. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So that's Jesus' invitation. That was the springboard for the conversation around exhaustion.
Well, I feel like with exhaustion, and sorry to jump in, Drew.
Just do it.
But with exhaustion, I thought it was really helpful for me to consider the idea of the yoke and that it's a working instrument, not a hammock.
Right.
I thought that was perfect.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh, okay, great. That's really helpful for me to see. And when I was reflecting on it, is that I'm wearing a yoke. It's not that I'm not wearing a yoke. It's more like, whose yoke am I wearing, right? If it's mine, then I often will have I don't know why I'm doing this visual, but you have this yoke and then you have this wood plank that goes off to the next yoke over. And I'm kind of like inviting Jesus to join my yoke. And so then I become exhausted because I'm kind of like wandering, meandering, floundering. And I'm like, Jesus, join my work. Jesus, join what I'm doing. And I'm exhausted in that whole thing. But yet the invitation is like, why don't you like join my yoke, instead of inviting me to join yours. And in that, you won't have to worry so much about where you're going. And I think that that is a massive piece of the exhaustion that we often feel is this, where am I going? What am I doing? Is this going to work out? What's going to happen? And Jesus is like, well, I can handle that part of it. Why don't you join me? And let's go in this direction together. And that felt really like, oh, okay, yes, I'm still working, but man, it would be so nice to be working next to Jesus as Jesus is guiding the way. Like that sounds amazing.
And this whole sermon series has been our first response after we experience something, exhaustion, overwhelm, mistakes, wrapping up in a couple of weeks on anger, right? But then as you preached and you talked about the yoke as a working instrument, as you elaborated on that, it also made me realize, even just in this moment of, I wonder if part of this sermon series in this week in particular isn't just the first response after, but if we are yoked with Jesus rather than he's yoked to us, or we're yoked to all these other things of the world, a need to perform, a need to be right, a need to get ahead, a need to have this, that, I wonder if the type of exhaustion that comes from working with Jesus is a different type of exhaustion, like a satisfied, like, I am spent, but doing something that I love, and I poured myself into this, and this is good. And because it made me think like, so much of the exhaustion we talk about in the world is a negative exhaustion.
Right.
So it's not about a life of just, kumbaya, keep it copacetic, let's just chill. But the work thing like really intrigued me because it is different than the hammock.
Have you seen the show Jeremy Clarkson Owns a Farm? Have you heard this show?
That's the name of the show?
Jeremy Clarkson owns
He's the guy from the British car show. What's it called?
Oh, Top Gear?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
then it
Top Gear.
became Grand Tour.
And then a Grand Tour. And
to be specific, I like this.
Well, it went Top Gear. And
Deep
then
cut,
there's some
yeah.
things that happened.
True
so
fan.
Moved
Oh my
over
gosh. Wow.
Anyway,
Jeremy, if you're listening, you
We
can
love
come on
you.
the show anytime.
and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I love that how Jeremy Clarkson has no business owning a farm. That's part of the joy and humor of this whole thing. This guy has no reason. He buys a Lamborghini as his tractor because Lamborghini makes tractors.
Because who knew that they did that?
But if they-
I was
Yeah,
picturing the
like-
race car. It's a
It's an
tractor
actual tractor.
manufacturer.
Made by
Okay.
a
So
Lamborghini.
he buys it because of course, if you could, you would, if you have to have the nicest tractor. So he gets this tractor, and on this tractor, it has this like little beam thing that sticks off, and it's a guide. And the guide is supposed to go into the ground and create this path that you're supposed to follow. So this episode, Jeremy's trying to lay some seed in the field, and he is just all over the place. He cannot find the line, even though it's supposed to be making this line. He can't read it. He's super frustrated. And there's a point to this. It goes to with what you're saying, is that Jeremy is exhausted at the end because he's so frustrated in this meandering thing. It fast forwards like when the crop actually comes to fruition, and you see his field. It's like patches everywhere. He missed all these seeds, and he was so frustrated and so exhausted at the end of the day because he couldn't find the guide. He couldn't find the way. But when he starts to get it, as the show starts to progress and he has like another season, Jeremy starts to understand like how to farm. He's still exhausted at the end of the day, but it's like what you're talking about. He's so like, this is the best job ever. I'm exhausted. I'm tired, but this is the best job ever. And I'm like, that's the difference.
That's
one's
cool.
totally frustrated.
Yeah, it's like,
one's,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Well,
that's it.
Just what?
I'm jumping in.
All right.
No.
No, but it's good because, you're highlighting that the work with Jesus, that's the irony, that's the paradox. Working with Jesus brings rest. And that's, I think, something that's so hard for us to trust in. Like, will it really? Like, we might try it for a season, and we're tempted to go back into our own way to have control, because there is that connection, I think, so much, hear me, with love, that we want to control everything. And that's really exhausting, right? If I want to have a tight hold on the way I think things should be and go, and if I don't surrender that, like, I will be so fatigued and frustrated. But a good exhaustion is when you do work with Jesus that is so deeply fulfilling, right? And I love how Jesus describes himself. Very few times does Jesus actually ever say, this is what I'm like. He does a few times, but he describes himself as gentle and humble. The God of the universe says, I'm gentle and humble. And I'm not going to lay anything on you that's going to be like uncomfortable and like heavy and like ill-fitting. The work with me is light and it's free. And it's going to be so deeply restful here, so fulfilling. I think of like a good workout, long distance running, whatever, raising kids. Like, there's an endurance there. There's an exhaustion, but there's also like a fulfillment. At the end of it.
So you can have restful exhaustion if you're yoked with Jesus. But you can have a restless exhaustion if he's yoked with you or you're yoked with anything in the world. But then also you can have a restful rest if you're yoked with Jesus. But let's talk about restless rest for a moment. I mean, have you, because sometimes, like, is that just like yoking yourself to something that isn't Jesus that gives the illusion, but it's still restless,
think about all the times you go on vacation where it takes you how many days to actually finally exhale and rest. And so people will end up going like, oh, I got to hit the gym in the morning and get all my angst out so I can actually sit by the pool and relax, like.
Well, it's not a bad thing though, in a way, because it's in some ways we do need to get our stuff out, right? There has to be some kind of outlet for the stress or the tension or whatever, so that we can kind of go, oh, I've released this, right? It's kind of, it helps, I think, for that restful rest. But there was a quote that I said that so many people were like, ooh, about this. If you find, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher it. If rest is stressful, or if rest brings stress, then busyness is how you medicate.
Yeah.
And I don't know who said it. I heard it somewhere. And so many people are like, oh.
You can hear the sanctuary just resonate. It just.
It's so hard.
Surgery to the heart for so many.
It's like, how do we find peaceful rest? Because we'll go to things like, we'll sit in front of the TV, have a cocktail, things that might be kind of nice on the surface, but truly, are they going to really bring that deep soul rest that our hearts are longing for?
Yeah.
It's not. So what does restful rest look like with Jesus? Mike and Drew, what do you guys think?
Restful rest with Jesus. Yeah. So I wonder if it's a resting that is, if you're yoked with, I like how you said that, rather than Jesus yoked with you, which is so interesting because outside looking in, it looks the same, right?
Totally.
So outside looking in isn't really the interior motivation of the heart. So on the outside looking in, you can be like, wow, look, they're a pastor, they're a leader, they're a Bible study, they're a worship leader, da, 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 da. Like, they must be like at peace and joy and like they must get it.
Right.
But if it's Jesus yoked to my visions, my plan, my dreams, then it is this restlessness that can come in rest or work. So maybe it just comes back to, okay, it's a daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, minute by minute. Jesus, where are you going? Oh, okay. You want me to respond to that? Okay, I'm joining you in it.
Yeah.
Let's fill me up because I'm tired. But oh
Mhm.
Lord, you're saying I need to say no to that. Okay, but I feel like I need to. Why do I need to? Oh, maybe I feel like I just need to because I don't want them to be upset that I said no. But you're calling me to rest. Okay, so maybe it's more. It's not like a prescriptive. Like it's so much just like be yoked to Jesus and then discover that journey as you live.
Good.
I
Yeah.
appreciate how you said it's not a one and done thing.
Yeah.
I think about, I know it's not Jesus, but Elijah, was it Elijah that was with Baal, the prophets of Baal?
was
Eman.
Elijah.
I call him E-Man
E-man.
when I forget.
I wonder if it's because
put 'em
Elijah
together.
and Elisha, so I always get
It's
those.
Elijah.
The
Not
J,
Shah.
J,
The J.
Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah.
So Elijah with
First
the
Kings 19.
prophets of Baal, and
Nailed
so
it.
I think about this. He's yoked to God in that moment. He's bringing in buckets of water. He's adding fuel, like not fuel to the fire, but like things that should like squelch it out. And then you have this moment where it's like the fire comes down and just annihilates everything, and he's like, I win, and you're like, wow, that's such a demonstration of God with me and God's power. You would think Elijah would be like, all right, everybody, you now run. And what happens is like Jezebel's like, I'm coming after you. And he's like, oh no. And he runs away and he's like totally panicked. So here's a moment where he's completely yoked in a moment. And like you're talking about minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, he was in like this powerful moment, totally yoked to God, God demonstrating his power, his witness in his life. And then he's running and he's like, I'm spent. I'm over it. I'm done. I just, all the things that we were saying in the beginning of this episode was
It's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I don't want to do this
Actually,
anymore.
Like,
Can you end it? Exhausted.
Take me? Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And he's like falls back. And then you said, this is who God is. I am gentle and humble at heart. And that's how God approaches Elijah, with this gentleness and like this care.
Yeah.
And then from that renewal comes.
Well, he gives them food and a nap. He literally takes care of the physical needs.
That's all
He's
I need.
like, here's some food and take a nap. It's so interesting. It's like sometimes that's all we need is like, can you feed me and send me to bed? Because that's all he needed in that moment. There was no counsel even. It wasn't like, let me talk you through this. It was like, you're exhausted. Right. You're freaking out. Here's a snack. There, go have a nap. Like that's actually what happened. I so
relate with that. I'm like, oh my gosh, how many times do I just need some food and a little nappy,
right?
And then come on back, and we'll talk.
Yeah.
Which is different than how God provided rest for Moses, one on each side to raise his hands.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's the community.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a nap and food. Sometimes it's the right people who come alongside and say, I'm gonna bear the weight of whatever's going on. I'm gonna stay with you. I'm gonna pray with you. I'm gonna stay up through the night with you. You've told that story before.
Yeah, I love
it always looks different.
There's a moment in the Gospels, I love this, where Jesus has sent the disciples out 2 by 2 and they come back. You guys know this. And they're like, we did all these things. They're telling Jesus, like, we healed and we did this stuff. And the text is like, they were so busy, they didn't even have time to eat. It's like such a detail of how busy they were. And I think we can relate to that. Sometimes we're so busy, we're so exhausted. We're like, I didn't have lunch. I'm so fatigued. But I love Jesus's response. He says, come away with me to a solitary place and rest a while. Right? So the invitation again is there to the disciples, to hardworking Christian leaders. We see the work is good, so meaningful. I need you to stop and get some time just with me to rest a while.
Yeah.
And so they get on the boat. But then the story goes,
they go
across the sea, and that's when the feeding of the 5,000 takes place.
Yeah, because
which is really interesting.
They're like, all right, we're going on this advance. We're going to go on this retreat. It's going to be amazing when we're Jesus. Yeah. This is it.
Sometimes things can get hijacked, but
even Jesus got hijacked. His rest, he's like, okay. Guys,
well, no, he would.
Plan,
I love it. Even with Jesus, he would go to a solitary place, pray with the Father. And there's another moment where the disciples come looking for them, and the text is like, everyone were hunting. They were hunting for him. Wow. The disciples were hunting for Jesus, and they're like, everyone's looking for you. We got to go. Yeah. So there's this sense of urgency a lot that also can lead us to a place of exhaustion. Yeah. And that's what goes back to what you said. a discernment component, I think, with rest is huge. We have a hard time saying no. We don't want to disappoint people, right? So there's multiple layers here. We don't want to disappoint as doers and people who value productivity and look at all the things I can do. I heard this quote once that was like, when you start saying no to people, you might become less popular, but you're going to gain respect. So it's like, yeah, you might not like it, but people will respect it. And I think that's really important, especially for leaders, to have those boundaries, because when you are in positions of making decisions, you want to do it from a restful place. And that's not always easy.
So I'm hearing Jesus' invitation to us today is this restful rest and restful work. That in fact, being yoked with Jesus provides rest in both arenas. That a life with Christ is a life of rest, regardless of where you are. What an invitation. Like, I want that so badly. And it's a reminder of minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day.
It's good. Can I do one more thought, although we're going to wrap up in just 60 seconds?
Absolutely.
This idea. So we talk about what stayed on the cutting room floor, you know, and this one moment of the idea of learn to rest, not to quit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because sometimes there can be moments where like, I'm done. You know what? I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, no, just rest. Don't quit. And this idea of the 23rd Psalm of Jesus being a good shepherd to lead us beside still waters. The text is like, he makes me lay down, right? He makes me lay down. So learn to lay down and not to stay down.
Oh, that's good.
I know, I thought you'd like that alliteration. I was like, I didn't get that in the sermon, but it's like, we've got to learn to rest, and that doesn't mean to quit, you know? And it's like, I think just having that hope and that encouragement, like, it's okay to stop, right?
That was a great way to end. Nicely done. Nailed it.
Landed that
Thanks,
plane
Michael.
on the aircraft carrier.
Anyways, thanks everybody for joining us for Sermon Sessions. The conversation continues next week.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.